Hey guys, back again with another video. This one's going to be a little different than what most of my videos are. It's not really have anything to do with goalie gear. This is just kind of general goalie talk, which I'm more than happy to do as well. But just something specifically came out recently that kind of caught my attention, and I was like, oh, do a video about it. So the NHL Network every year does like a top 10. I think they do it of every position: center, left wing, right wing, defenseman, and then of course goaltending. So they came out with the top 10 goalies. They call it right now. So I mean, I haven't asked them. I don't know exactly like how that's weighted, what exactly they look like or look for to when they're making this list. Just based on the list itself and kind of the fact that I'm saying right now, I'm going to guess that, you know, most of it is probably weighted on last year's regular season. And then beyond that, you know, they probably take into consideration if the goalie did make the playoffs, how they performed in the playoffs. And then also just with some of them, especially if they're not like really young rookies and they have a body of work over years, I think they kind of take that into consideration too. Again, this is just me kind of guessing based on what the list is. But I would say it's mostly weighted on the last year's regular season. So keep that in mind. This isn't like a career list or whatever. And so for the most part with this top 10, like I don't really have a problem with it. There's not any like glaring omissions or people that I would say, oh, they definitely don't belong in the top 10. This is all subjective. You know, this is their list. Again, this is their list, not mine. So if you don't agree with it, don't come after me. I'm just talking about their list. But I mean, it's subjective. So it's what they say. So you could easily have a completely top 10 list and hey, that is your opinion. And it's not a factual thing. No one can say right or wrong because it's your opinion. Unless you're specifically talking about like a specific stat, like goals against, save percentage, whatever. Just you saying, I think this goalie is the best right now. Okay, that's your opinion. But anyway, so let's talk about the list, right? So I'm going to count down from 10 to 1 who they picked. So at number 10, they put Demko. Number 9, Gustafsson. Number 8, Georgiev. Number 7, Ottinger. Number 6, Ullmark. Number 5, Saros. Number 4, Hellebuyck. And then in the top 3, you got at 3, Sorokin, at 2, Schisturkin, and at 1, Vasilevsky. Now, if we're looking at that based on their nationalities, we got 4 Russians in the top 10, 3 Americans, 2 Swedes, and 1 Finn. What is weird about that? 0 Canadians. That's really what shocked me on this. It's again, not that like on an individual basis there was like a specific guy that I'm like shocked is not on there, but it's just the fact that like motherland of hockey, Canada, and they got 0 goalies on this top 10 list. Again, this is just NHL Network's, you know, opinion, but honestly, like I stopped and I thought about it and I'm like, well, what Canadian goalie could have been on this list? And to be honest, there's really nobody that I would say definitely, oh yeah, they need to be in the top 10. Again, all subjective, and you might think there's a Canadian guy that should be in the top 10. I mean, just like, you know, like there's Marc-Andre Fleury, but at this point, let's face it, he's basically at the end of his career, very tail end. And if we're talking about right now, I don't think he's a top 10 goalie. I mean, I still love watching him play. I love the guy. But I just don't think he's a top 10 goalie right now. You got somebody like Jordan Binnington who, you know, came on the scene in that, what was it, 2018 Cup run with St. Louis. But he's kind of had up and down since then. So, again, I can't really say he's a top 10. You know, the only guy, and it's not even that I think he's top 10, but like the one guy I think maybe has the most promise, it's like a young up-and-coming guy who's Canadian, is Carter Hart. But, you know, big thing with him is he's stuck behind, you know, a shitty team. And there's only so much as a goalie you can do. Like, if you're playing on a shitty team, one, your stats are just not going to be good. But also, it's like, especially with a young guy, sometimes it can affect your development. And, you know, it's just that being on a losing team, it just mentally can wear on you and whatnot. So if we're just talking about what he's actually done on the ice and his stats and stuff, I don't think it warrants top 10. I just think maybe he's got like that top 10 potential in him if he can grow, if his team can be a little better. But as of like right now, I really don't know. So I mean, if you guys have any suggestions of like any Canadian guys you think maybe belong in the top 10, we can talk about it in the comments. So definitely leave a comment with that. Also, if you think, there's guys not on this top 10 list that no matter what nationality they are, that should be, again, this is all subjective. Feel free to leave a comment and say who you think should have been on this top 10. Like I said, I don't really have a problem. I'm looking at this top 10 and I think it's pretty solid overall. And like I said, when you try to think of how they weight this, like you see a guy like Ullmark, for instance, played for Boston last season, right? He had a phenomenal season. Boston had a record-setting season. He won the Vezina. He's not number one, right? He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's sixth on the list. So obviously, I feel like, he probably got docked a little bit for the playoffs. They were upset in the first round, one of the biggest first round upsets of all time. And also, there's not like a real large body of work, to rely on with him either. So even though he had that amazing regular season, he's sixth on the list, which is fine. Like, I don't really have a problem with that. I have no reason to believe he can't have another good season. Probably not the same season he had last year. That's probably like a one in a career season. But I don't think he's gonna like fall off. I don't think he's like past his prime, right? Certainly by no means. So like I can see how they have him where they have him on the list and why he is on the list. And then, so for instance, with number one, right? Their number one overall goalie, Vasilevsky. I think if you go just by last regular season, he's probably not number one. But you can't deny how good he's been over the past, what's it been, 5 seasons or whatever it's been. If we're talking about like a little longer period of time than just last season, like it's hard to argue that he's not number one. Maybe specifically not the best regular season last regular season, but I mean the guy just has it all. And some of it is an eye test too. You can't just go by stats or whatever. You just see the tools they have, how they play. I mean the guy's got size, he's got athleticism, but he also has good fundamentals, a good foundation to his game. Like what's the weakness with him really, right? And this is really, another thing that jumps out to me with this list is like, it's just a golden age for Russian goaltending. Like I said, you got 4 Russian guys on here. The lowest ranked one is Georgiev, Gorgiev. I hope I'm not pronouncing it wrong. I always say Georgiev, but what do I know? I'm a stupid American, they have him at 8. But then the other 3 are all in the top 3. 1, 2, 3. Vasilevsky, Schisturkin, Sorokin. And for me, I think Sorokin is even kind of underrated. I know they have him 3, thinking that how is that underrated? But he might be number 1 for me. I really love this guy's game. Playing for the Islanders, he probably doesn't get the publicity he should, and the fact that they weren't like a really great team or anything. They made the playoffs, but they weren't like, it's not like like Vasilevsky with Tampa, right? So I feel like people don't realize how good Sorokin is, and probably a lot of people are not watching the Islanders that much. I mean, there's Islanders fans, but outside of Islanders fans, that's not a team that like draws in a lot of the casual fans to watch, right? But when I watch him play again, it's like Schisturkin, like he doesn't quite have the size. I mean, sorry, not Schisturkin, like Vasilevsky. He doesn't quite have the size of Vasilevsky, but like other than that, I love his fundamentals and the foundation of his game. Like it's something that I feel like he could have long-term success with. It's not just, he doesn't just rely on athleticism or just rely on this one aspect. Just all around, I really like his game. And I think maybe in another season or 2, he might be number 1 on this list, to be honest. Again, you can never completely separate the goalie from the team, and a mediocre bad team can kind of drag the opinion of a goalie down. But I just really love Sorokin's game. So I think him and Vasilevsky could easily flip-flop in another season or 2 on a top 10 list. Schisturkin, I think, belongs right around there. Those top 3, I think you can almost rearrange them anyway. Schisturkin, they have him at 2. Uh, Again, he's recently won a Vezina, and there's just a lot to like when watching him. Kind of like Sorokin, he doesn't have that same size like Vasilevsky. I mean, he's not like tiny or anything, but he doesn't have that huge size like Vasilevsky has. And I feel like he may kind of rely a little more on his athleticism than what you may want to see, which I don't think is really affecting him right now. Like, he's young, he's in his prime, it's fine. It'd be interesting to see how he develops as he ages, and maybe he doesn't quite have that athleticism anymore, if he can kind of rein that in and have a more just secure fundamentals in his game. But right now he is a pretty dominant goalie, especially when he's on. So yeah, just Russians are just dominating goaltending right now. And not too far behind that is the Americans. You got Hellebuyck, Ottinger, and Demko are the 3 Americans on this list. I really like Ottinger and Demko. We'll see what's going to happen with like Olympics or World Cup of hockey. I really miss those things. I wish we could see the NHL guys playing in a national tournament like that. That's something that always excited me. I love seeing it. I'm American, so I love watching the American team play. And it's just more interesting when you have the best of the best playing. And it really sucks that we haven't been sending the best to the past few Olympics, and there hasn't really been a World Cup of hockey in a long time, because especially for USA, because I feel like USA, not even talking about the goaltending, just the skaters and just the talent pool is probably better than ever right now. And it's a shame that we haven't been able to see that compete on a national stage against other countries, Canada, whatever. So I would really love to see that. But yeah, Ottinger and Demko are young guys. They've shown a lot of promise and potential. Demko, might have some injury issues, and the team he plays on, again, I'm talking about how the team can kind of drag the goalie down or, whatever. But he did show, he came back last season and he did show improvement. And I feel like, with his injury and with the way the team played last season, there was a little bit of a blip there for him. But I think going forward, he's going to continue to be a good goalie. I don't think this is like a sign of a downfall for him. I don't have any like worries about Demko being a solid goalie. And Ottinger too, the thing with Ottinger, he's got a good team in front of him. So that, you got the two things colliding there, good goalie, good team. I really like that Dallas team. I think they could have a lot of success coming up. And of course, Ottinger is going to be a part of that. Hellebuyck is the highest rated USA guy at 4. Personally, and again, all subjective, I mean, I can't argue with like his stats and what he's accomplished. But when I watch him play, I just feel like Hellebuyck is a little more reliant on the team in front of him. He's like how I was saying before, how some guys rely maybe too much on their athleticism. I feel like he relies a lot on his size and being in the right position, which that's not a bad thing at all. But I feel like if he doesn't have a pretty decent defense, I mean, it doesn't have to be like a top team defense in front of him, but like he needs to have a structure, and he needs to feel like he can rely on the defense in front of him to cover certain things and have kind of an order going on in front of him. If things get kind of scrambly and crazy in front of him, that his movement of, like, if you watch a lot of his highlights, he's on his stomach a lot. He's like flopping around a lot. And of course, but they're highlights, so he's making the saves in those instances. But I don't know. I just personally, for me, that's something that if I was like a GM or whatever, I don't know. It's kind of like if I have a good team in front of them, I'm not worried. But it's like, well, if my team is not that good, if the defense isn't too solid, I feel like that's when he kind of dips, right? And he kind of has struggles. And he's by no means the only goal. I mean, like I said, goalies a lot are tied to the team. There's only so much they can do. But, there's some goalies that can kind of compensate for a bad defense or compensate with their athleticism for stuff. And for me, like Hellebuyck is almost a throwback to sort of the previous generation of guys from like, I don't know, mid 2000s to like the 20 teens. Somebody like a Luongo, who I love Lou. One of my favorite all-time goalies, played for my favorite team, the Panthers. But again, he's not somebody you confuse with like ultimate athleticism and sliding around and doing things like Vasilevsky does, right? Like, he makes the good first save, he's in position, uses his size, but if he has to get a little scrambly, things can get dicey. They're on their butt, they're on their stomach, you know what I mean? So for me, like, I understand why they put Hellebuyck there, because he has more of a body of work than Ottinger and Demko. But like, if I was building a team right now, I'd probably go with Ottinger or Demko over Hellebuyck. That's just me personally. Again, not that I'm saying Hellebuyck is a bad goal or anything like that. That's just why, for me, I kind of think the other two guys in my mind are ahead of him. But again, that's just my opinion. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments. Then you got the two Swedish guys. You got Gustafsson and Ullmark. I mean, I already kind of talked about Ullmark. Gustafsson, again, kind of like Ullmark. It's funny, the two Swedes on the list. I feel like a lot, this was weighted a lot on their regular season from last season. It's not like a knock on them, because they just don't have that body of work, but it's not their fault. The young guys, they just haven't, and they haven't been like number one guys for very long. And in Gustafsson's case, I mean, he was sharing time with Fleury. But yeah, so a lot of that is based on the regular season. But I mean, I don't see why there's any reason they can't continue that performance going forward. Gustafsson looked really good last season, and pretty solid team in front of him. It's not a powerhouse necessarily, but he's got a solid team, which always helps. And then you got the one Finn, UC Saros, the patron saint of undersized goalies. So, I mean, I love watching the guy play and watching him succeed in a league that has, for the most part, ignored undersized goalies, says they can't do it. Some teams refuse to draft guys under a certain height. But he shows it's possible. Now, I 100% understand why teams do it. I understand why they want big guys, because the bigger you are, the more margin for error you have, right? You just take up more net, and even if you're not exact with your angle and positioning, there's a good chance the puck will hit you anyway, just because you're big. And that just makes UC Saros even more amazing, right? Just how good he is, how effective he is, knowing that he has to be even more exact with his angles, his movement, and all that stuff, right? He can't afford to be off, because he doesn't have the size to compensate for that. And like, his movement is awesome. He's a very athletic guy. Kind of like I said, Schisturkin. It'd be interesting going forward to see as he ages and going on into his career, like if his game changes at all. Again, once that athleticism kind of starts going as you age, do you change your game to compensate for that? Like, how do you deal with that? So that would be interesting. I mean, for now, it's not a worry. He's still in his prime. He's still a young guy. But just be interesting to see the evolution of his game as he gets older, how that affects him, if he like falls off a cliff. I mean, not saying he will. I don't think he will, but we'll see. Because sometimes that can happen with guys that are very athletic, right? And then they age and the athleticism goes. But yeah, so that's the top 10 list. Like I said, it's not that I really have a big argument with it. It was just, for me, like, the biggest surprise was the 0 Canadians. Like, that's crazy to me. There's no Canadian goalies on the top 10 list. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of the NHL Network's top 10 list, who you think should be on the list, that isn't on the list, and whatnot. But that's the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.